You know, when you think about it, there's really only two ways to open up a film. Either slow burns filled with mystery and intrigue as we are slowly introduced to the world and the characters, or just yeah, this movie is pretty amazing, and it almost was never made. And on top of that, it may have very well saved an entire studio department. While still working at Disney, Jeffrey Katzenberg frequently wanted to make an animation adaptation of the Ten Commandments, an influential film for the time that time has not exactly been kind to. Disney was apprehensive on the idea of a religious film and continuously denied the project. Which, now that I think about it, Disney denying amazing underrated films is a trend that we will see often throughout this series when we're talking about underrated masterpieces. Just kind of funny. Anyway, when Katzenberg left the studio to start up the animation department over at DreamWorks, work began on the project in full earnest. The film was originally going to be the first film from the department, but was beat out by Ants, which was rushed to theaters to compete with A Bug's Life. And, yeah, it didn't go well. So the pressure was on for the Prince of Egypt to do well. Things weren't looking great for the department, and now everything rided on the Prince of Egypt being, well, a good movie. And more than that, the studio needed the film to be stellar for the department to have a reason to stay in operation. And boy howdy, let me tell ya, did they ever deliver. The Prince of Egypt is a movie that uses the idea of symmetry in its storytelling and its visuals so well that I wish this film was taught in film schools, if only to show people how the concept of symmetry can unify your entire film. Before I even mention the story or the writing or the visuals or just anything else, I have to start with the soul of the movie, which is the music. Outside of the incredible music numbers that just inject pure serotonin into my brain, the musical score makes incredible use of motifs. That is, short, recurring pieces of melody that remind the audience of a certain character or place in the story. Just listen to this reprise that is heard throughout the entire film.
Hush now, my baby, be still, love, don't cry. Sleep as you're rocked by the stream.
Or this piece that's heard whenever Moses is reminiscing about growing up in the palace.
This is my home.
Keep the idea of using music to tie things together in mind when we move forward talking about the movie, because this movie uses a lot of subtle music cues to clue the audience in as to what the characters are thinking or what their motivations are in a certain scene, without having to have an over-explanation dialogue as to expound upon how they are feeling. And if you know me, you know I love subtle storytelling when it's done right. But getting on to the plot and the movie itself. The story follows two brothers, Moses and Ramesses, the princes of Egypt. Ramesses, being the older of the two, is generally more responsible and serious, while Moses, well, he's kind of the complete opposite. We get to see some wonderfully written scenes with the two of them together. Moses getting them into trouble, Moses getting them out of trouble, and we get to see just how close they are to each other. And that is before the story rips them apart with a dark secret. Moses is actually an adopted slave. You see, ancient Egypt was built on the backs of slave labor from the Hebrew people. These slaves were property and used and treated as such by the elite of Egypt. Throughout the beginning of the film, we see things from the perspective of said elite. The gorgeous views, the reckless fun, the luxurious parties, and all of the wonders that this civilization has to offer. During one of these parties, Moses has an encounter with a Midianite woman that was captured and brought to the party for amusement purposes, shall we say. Also, side note / tangent incoming, when I was growing up and I saw this scene, I think that's called an awakening to the type of people that you're attracted to. Yeah, I fully blame this movie and Kim Possible for the fact that I'm attracted to badass women with thunder thighs that don't take shit from anybody. Yeah, and I also could probably kick my ass.
Love the kind of woman that can kick my ass.
Yeah, anyway, back on topic. This scene shows us that Moses is not entirely amoral or entirely a dick, as he helps Zipporah escape instead of taking advantage of her. What follows is one of the most creative, impactful animated scenes I have seen to this day. Moses runs into his birth sister and she recognizes him. And initially he's concerned about a slave touching him, but when she starts singing that motif that we heard at the beginning of the film, it starts to sow the seeds of doubt in his mind as to who he actually is. He runs off and searches for answers in the hieroglyphs of the palace, and oh, this scene. Just watch the movie and you will understand. This scene blew my mind when I first watched it as a kid, and it still blows my mind to this day. It is so creative and it's just wonderful. This is when the tone of the film takes a drastic change. Instead of the camera looking up at all of the wonders of the city and the skylines, you start to focus more on the foreground, looking down at the people being exploited to build it. Of course, as to be expected of a story of brothers, it pits the two brothers against each other in their ideologies and morals. Moses, after having a crisis of conscience, accidentally kills a slave driver and decides he can't take it anymore and runs away from Egypt into the desert. As fate would have it, he is saved by the same Midianite tribe that Zipporah belongs to. I really hope I'm saying all of these words right. Anyway, the tribe takes him in and completely changes his view of life, and we get to see him change as time goes by, and he ends up getting married to the woman of his dreams. One day, as fate would have it, after chasing after a sheep, he is confronted by the God of the Hebrews, Yahweh. Well, actually, if we want to be more accurate, it's the Midianite understanding of the Hebrew God El Shaddai, which we know this because the name Yahweh doesn't actually show up in the Bible until this point in history, which suggests that maybe multiple cultures over the years have had different names for the same God. Sorry, going on a tangent. Ancient history and certain topics of theology are just so fascinating to me. Back to the story on hand. After one more note. The Midianite people and the Hebrew people weren't exactly friendly people to each other. Now there were the Canaanites that split off and joined the Hebrews after they were liberated from Egypt, but on the whole, there was a whole bloody war that happened between the two factions after the Hebrews left Egypt. Yeah, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there was already animosity there even when the Hebrews were still slaves. So the fact that Moses, who was outcast by the Hebrew people because he grew up as a prince of Egypt, was outcast by the Egyptian people because he was a Hebrew, now marries a Midianite woman, making him what, like triple outcast at this point in the story? I mean, how much more unqualified can a man get? Sorry, no more tangents, I promise. Anyway, getting back to the story. God tells him to go back to Egypt and set his people free, further telling him that through him he will perform great miracles. When Moses returns, he doesn't find the man that he once called father as Pharaoh, but instead Ramesses, who is overjoyed by his return. That is until Moses tells him why he's come back. You know, to overthrow the current political and economic structure of the land that he's now ruling over. What follows is even more incredible shots of asymmetric symmetry. As Ramesses is speaking, we see all of the splendor of Egypt, as he is sitting in the same exact posture and poses as his father. While when Moses is on screen, we see all of the suffering of the people. It's so poetic and not subtle at all that at times it just kind of makes you laugh, but it's great. It all climaxes in an incredible song pitting the two of them against each other, using reprises from the earlier songs when Moses was singing about growing up. Then followed by the last plague, the death of the firstborn. What's tragic is we see Moses plead with Ramesses before it happens. They reminisce about growing up, about getting into trouble together, about Moses getting them out of trouble. But when Ramesses sees his son, his heart is hardened once more, and the last plague is called down. which ironically leads to the death of his first son. One last thing I do want to point out about this whole sequence of events, and just the film in general, is how well it handles somber topics and intense moments, and it handles them very carefully. When Ramesses releases the Hebrews, it isn't a joyous moment. The film is completely silent. It's reverential of all of the lives that have been lost, and really a lot of the innocent lives that have been lost. Moses isn't happy. As soon as he leaves Ramesses' side, he starts weeping. It's like he's questioning whether he's in the right and doing the right thing. It's not until he's reassured by his sister and his wife and sees the crowds of finally liberated people that the joyous music begins to kick in. But the story doesn't end there. We still have one last incredible moment of animation to do. The parting of the Red Sea. As the Hebrews approach the Red Sea, Ramesses has had a change of heart and wants his economy back. Or at the very least, he wants vengeance. Trapped between the sea and an army, Moses calls to God for one more miracle. And boy, does he deliver, splitting the sea in two. And let me tell you, the animation and just this scene in general is so good. I love that Aaron, the one that's been down on Moses the entire film, is the first one to trust him and walk up to him and be like, yeah, okay, I'll walk through this wall of water. This is fine. And the music is just so perfect and beautiful, and the animation, the freaking whale in the water. Yeah! This film almost ends on a somber note as well, as Moses is standing on one bank of the sea in clear sky and sun, whereas we see Ramesses just shrouded in darkness and confusion, screaming Moses' name. It's pretty dark. Thankfully, the film shows the people celebrating and ends on a happier note, but it's still something that kind of makes you stop and think. There are so many fun little things to notice as you watch your way through the film, things that tell the story in subtle little ways. Like how in order for the two priests of Egypt to match Moses' miracles need time, lights, smoke, mirrors, music, whereas Moses just shows up and is like, skedaddle, skedoodle, my stick is now a noodle. Which, for the sake of the story, is implying that maybe the Hebrew god is real and the Egyptian gods are not. Again, not telling you what to believe, just approaching it from the storytelling perspective of the film. Religious topics are sensitive, I understand. Just a cool little storytelling detail. Or again, how the camera angle shows all of these wonderful, splendid things as Ramesses is speaking. And then when Moses is speaking, we get to focus more on the slaves, and as the story goes, Moses sees more and more and more of the slaves. So much love went into this film, and it just shows. But did it succeed in saving the department? Well, in short, yeah, as DreamWorks Animation is still around to this day, and has made some just absolute treasures like Shrek and the Kung Fu Pandas films. Almost said series, I don't know. My brain wanted to say series and films at the same time. Anyway, the long answer is that The Prince of Egypt was a success at the time of its release, and it earned 2 Oscar nominations with a win in the song When You Believe. But since then, I haven't really seen anybody online talking about it, which is kind of shocking and really a shame. I mean, for being released in 1998, the film still holds up surprisingly well. Sure, there's a few goofy facial animations here and there, but that's really the only nit I can pick about the entire film. The story is well written, the characters are fleshed out, they all feel real and believable, and the music. Oh my god, the music!
There can be miracles when you believe. When you believe.
Sorry you had to see that. If you have never watched this film, please do yourself a favor. grab a glass of wine or whiskey or whatever it is you like to drink, sit down and enjoy one of the best animated masterpieces I have ever seen. One that was just so criminally underrated, that has had a huge impact on me, how I view animation, and really just my love of films. Or at the very least, if you don't want to watch the movie, throw on the soundtrack as you commute and it will make your commute 10 times better, I promise you. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed the video. This was a fun one to make. Prince of Egypt holds a very special place in my heart, as it was a film I watched growing up and still watch to this day. I love this movie. I wish more people would talk about it. It's great. If you want to get to know me better, as always, you can go to Flying Walrus Live and catch me live streaming. Yeah, that's really all I got. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care, guys.